and Lightning weekly podcast.
Talking all things mediumship, spirit and paranormal.
Awaken with thunder and lightning. Reignite
the light
in your soul. Hi Roger, how are you?
Hi Gavin, I'm tip-top and tickety-boo. How about yourself, sir?
I'm wonderful. So we thought we'd talk about haunted items, haunted dolls and objects, which I guess could vary from dolls, ornaments, jewellery, locations. Could be classed as an item.
What type of things then are haunted items?
Anything that a spirit is attached to. So obviously it could be attached for more than one reason, which we will go into. I guess anything physical they could attach to, maybe even properties.
That's interesting, yes.
So why might they be attached? I guess would have been one of the most common questions to start with. Why might a spirit be attached to an item? And can they be positive as well as negative? So what would you think on those to start with?
I would say that haunted objects probably fall in two categories. Those which the spirit has voluntarily been asked if it wishes to enter this object, and they agree to it and they volunteer that way. And I would say the second is where spirit has been tricked into occupying an object and they're locked in that object for the sake of use of power.
I would agree there. On both of those examples, I would have said they could be positive, they could be negative.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Or they could be in between.
Yeah, they could be kind of neutral. So I guess some of you might be wondering that are listening, what do you mean forced into an item, tricked into it, and voluntarily? And if voluntarily, you might be thinking, why? So let's talk positive spirit first, if that's all right, Roger. So if we're talking a positive spirit, why might it want to be in an object rather than just being free to go here, there, and everywhere that it wants to? Why might that be? And does that mean it's not been to the light? In my belief, I'd say, and my beliefs do change from time to time, but I would say, yes, it would mean it's not been to the light. In my belief. So why might it want to attach to an item? Obviously, can get a bit of this. I can bring one of my guides through to talk towards the end. But I would have said they'd want to ground for an anchoring point. To give themselves a little bit more power, give themselves a little bit more protection. Come across cases where they might want to be helping on something, but if they got caught up with the wrong negative type of spirit, perhaps they could harness their energy, take power from them and keep them somewhere they might not want to be. And if they're already in an item, they can't be forced technically into another item. They've got a bit of security there, a bit of power. They can't accidentally get caught in some light and be taken up. There's got to be a bit more of a process to get rid of them. And like I said, taking anything to the light, unless it's for highest good, why should we just choose to take something to the light? They may have a perfectly adequate reason as to why they don't want to be in the light.
Yeah. That's interesting. How about the spirit who's volunteered to go into a particular object? Could it also be that they are drawn to the owner of said object?
They could be drawn to the owner of the said object. They could be drawn to an item that was their said object. Why? Why might they want to do that rather than pass into the light if it's a positive spirit? Sometimes knowledge they might have built up in their life. When they get back to spirit, they might be becoming a guide with ascension. They might have to come back to life in order to ascend. That wisdom that they've learned in their life, yes, it could be used for themselves in a future life or in a future way to do with ascension, but perhaps they may deem it that they want to pass on their knowledge and wisdom that they've learned in that life to someone else that could continue the cause. To temporarily be here still in order to aid in a greater way. Pass on that wisdom that took them a lifetime to acquire, passing on that knowledge and wisdom, that ability to another that can continue the cause.
So for spirits in that instance who are doing it for the higher good, for the greater good, would they, when it does come time for them to move across into the light, would they be able to ascend higher?
Good question. I'm going to answer this.
I'm just
thinking about what I already know. I would have said the potential is, yes, they could ascend higher, because technically they're continuing their life here on Earth. So they're taking it a little bit further. They could have achieved more by the time they do go into the light. I don't know whether that's definitely the case, but if it's for the good, then potentially, yes, they could then ascend higher because they've completed more before they've got stepped into that light, which seems logical to me. Whether that's actually the case, I don't know, but I've got a good feeling in my heart that that is correct. It's not something I've actually pondered on before until you've asked that question. It's a very good question. But that's the way I feel with my heart, that yes, then they could ascend higher up. But I don't think they'd do it for the purpose of getting a further ascension level, if you want to call it level, or that. I think that would only happen because they're actually doing it for another reason that is good. I can give a bit of an example into that. We have got a few haunted items around us. And what I've learnt, at least with a couple, is they've deliberately found us, not us gone searching for them. We've had things that have ended up in shopping baskets and all sorts that we've not initiated. And the more we've got to know, it's like they've waited to come around us because they've got some sort of knowledge or some sort of help to give. Two that I'm referring to here would help with regard to clearances, things like that.
Okay.
I won't go into the nitty-gritty of the exactly in what way they help, but from what we've understood, what they've told us, they've deliberately come and found us rather than us going and finding them. So they wanted to share, one of them wanted to share the knowledge and wisdom she'd got in her life with a good cause to be able to, for it to be taken further. So as a newbie with clearances, she was very strong and had already practiced in her own lifetime clearances. And as I'd already built up some communication with her, it was very easy to trust her as a spirit to accept what I was receiving was correct. So she's passed on her knowledge to us.
So before she's crossed over, she's decided to come to help you.
Giving me a lifetime's worth of knowledge in one go.
Yeah.
Which I greatly appreciate, but it was more we asked the questions. It was like she knew and deliberately found us, which was fascinating. So that's one of the reasons that they might choose to still be here and be in that item so they can't be led off of that course. They can't be captured by something that may be a bit stronger than them. Yes, they're strong in their own right, but they can't be manipulated. They've chosen where they want to be. They're safe, they've got a grounding point. And it's like an identity to them. It's like they're still a person, even though it's not a moving, walking thing.
Would you say they're a strong force in their own right?
Yes. And as I said, being already in an item, it can't be used in an incorrect way either.
That led me to the next bit, because the next bit I was going to say, does it lead them away from being manipulated, was the next thing I was going to ask.
Yes.
Can they be manipulated?
What's around us, I would have said no.
Yeah.
I would have said no. Some in an item might still be able to be manipulated. I can think of items that are placed into jewellery, but that would have been by an element of trickery, I would have said in the first instance. So we've spoken then of those items that may have wanted to choose to be in an item. Some of those that with the ones we've been referring to, they're positive so far. Something may not want to go to the light, might not want to be dragged to the light, so may choose an item to attach to so that that doesn't happen, to give them longitude on Earth, so to speak. And they might be negative. They might want to cause a problem, and they may have chosen that kind of themselves and had some sort of aid or guidance to attach to that. It normally is along the lines of permission. So a positive or a negative, you can use your intention and lock something into something. If you were the spirit of a negative spirit and wanted to be locked into something, you'd need something that's already got a grounding on this earth. So you might seek permission from someone to be locked into an item they already possess, which you could use that as an example. One of the Ed and Lorraine Warren cases with Annabelle. Trickery led her to be locked into a doll. She tricked the owners of the doll to lock her into the doll. They didn't know what they were doing, sought permission, thought it was pretending to be a child.
Yeah.
So she's got a grounding anchor. But then it works the other way around. A person, unfortunately, could call in an energy that maybe not meant to be down here on Earth and lock that into an item. So sometimes it's with choice, sometimes it's without choice. Sometimes it could be spirit's choice, sometimes it could be a living being's or living energy's choice. Okay? I know one of the questions I get often asked, is it only bad spirits that haunt items? In my experience, what I've come across, I know more positive items than I do negative items. But I'd have said there's probably pretty much a balance. You can go to certain locations, haunted paranormal locations, they're likely to have more negative spirits there than positive. But then a lot of haunted items can be very protective.
Would you say that all spirits who are attached to items, whether they be a piece of jewellery, an everyday object, I'm just thinking a cup or a mirror or something like that, have they crossed over, or are they deliberately trying to avoid going to the light?
Some, if they were negative, I'd have said, well, negative or positive, might deliberately choose not to go to the light. One thing I will say there, though, you'd said mirror. Personally, I used to believe, yes, you can have a spirit attached to a mirror. I don't see that as being the case as much anymore. I would have said the mirror would be used more as a portal, that a particular spirit may use that portal more than any other. Perhaps more a feeling that I've got as time's gone by. So you may have one negative item that will use that mirror more than any other.
Oh yes, that's interesting.
Spirit, but I don't think you'd lock one spirit to a mirror. I would have said the mirror is more likely to be a portal rather than, I would have said that had been created intentionally as a portal rather than locking something to it. Doesn't mean something couldn't be locked to the frame.
Well, it's the whole object, isn't it? That's the glass.
Yes.
And the frame itself. It could be a chalice. It could be an item of clothing. It could be a doll. It could be a box.
Furniture.
It could be a piece of furniture.
Now, furniture, I want to mention briefly, some people might think that a piece of furniture has got an attachment, spirit energy attached to it. Now, say there was a rocking chair, I think it's quite capable for a spirit that's crossed to the light to come and manipulate items as well. So it might have been their favourite rocking chair, it might still be in the family, they might be able to make that chair rock. That doesn't mean, in my opinion, that there is a spirit attached to that chair. It might be a spirit that likes to come and use that chair. I don't feel that necessarily means or deems that it would be a full attachment. Likewise, there might be a spirit that comes around a teddy bear, comes around a car. They may have crossed to the light, but there's just something they were drawn to. It was their favourite item or favourite bit of jewellery while they were alive. It doesn't always mean a full attachment. Although you can have attachments to those items.
Well, I suppose on a bigger scale, there are cases of people, engineers and things being attached to parts of aeroplanes which have crashed and then being reused in the future.
Or cars.
Or cars.
That could be to do with a death on that, like you'd said, like the aeroplane, etc. It might have been the last bit of equipment that they were near at the time. And then that might cause a problem on other things, especially if they deem that they shouldn't have died. And which then leads it to, it could be around it, it could be attached to it. Because somewhere along the line there would have needed to either been permission and something granted for it to happen so that it was grounded energy to it. So I know this crosses over a bit of boundaries as we're talking here. But ultimately, yes, you can have good, yes, you can have bad. Yes, they can have chosen themselves. Yes, they might have been forced. Which I've chosen, we've spoken briefly, Roger, on why they might choose to attach to an item. What about when they're forced? They're tricked. What would you say with regard to the trickery?
I would say that the spirit's being manipulated in a certain way and being told an untruth by quite a strong person who's managed to convince them that this is all right. Yes, that's a positive thing to do. And then they've been locked in a particular device, which is then used for other purposes, be it nefarious or what.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it might be a bit like Aladdin story with the lamp. They might have brought an energy in order to try and be given greater luck. Likewise, they might bring an energy in order to cause a problem for someone else and give that item across. The other item, the other time they might be tricked into something, might be for highest good, where they're unaware of how to return something to source. They might attach a negative energy in order so it can't cause a problem for someone and attach it to an item for that reason. Kind of hem it in, and they'll take that item away and put it somewhere safe so it can't harm anyone else, in theory.
So effectively, you are clearing an area or clearing a space of something which could be malevolent.
Yeah.
The person has locked it into that particular item and then removed it from that area.
Yeah, which could be removing it from a certain item that it was already kind of locked to, maybe a property, and moving it to a singular item that can then be transported and moved.
What would you say the energies would be generally for items where the spirit has been tricked or forced into it? Would you say that they are malevolent, or would you say there can be an in-between?
Typically, I've said the malevolent, they're not going to be happy. But if you can try to get an understanding and want to understand why, then they'll soon become more of a neutral energy. They'll start talking to you. They want to give their story across. If they know that you could help them, then they're going to be open to listening. They like to work with you. They may even want to do something good in return for being released back. It's kind of a bit like slavery. If it was a slave in the past, they're not going to be happy. But if you can understand and then just like, well, I've understood that, can let you go, they're likely to, okay, well, can I do something for you in return? So there's a bit of both going on there. I would have said the biggest problem is most people don't try to understand. They might let something go and then they still don't know how to get home. So then they're not stuck to an item who might have been freed, but they don't know what to do. They're still furious. No one's tried to understand them. They've not really tried to help them. I said that it's one of the biggest problems with a negative item, which could talk about gin or divot boxes and things like that. I've come across a couple of those, and as long as you get to understand first, seek first to understand, often they'll not cause a problem. It really, really does depend. But imagine there's a few people listening now, Roger, they're thinking, bloody hell, how do I know if I've got something like this, though?
Yes. How can you tell the difference?
You would have an inkling, I would have said. Something might be happening around someone. So the biggest time that I might get someone inquiring, something's happening around the person. Sometimes they could have had an item something's been attached to for years and nothing's happened. So I'd have said then there's got to be something that's happened around the person that's made activity start happening. So if we're talking positive, you might have doors opening, noises, something trying to make themselves aware that they're attached to the item. But it might be that it's always in the room that the item's in. The item might move. And yes, we will do a second part where how do you communicate with these items or how do you check. But not all mediums, but most mediums, you could contact, they'd let you know. If that kind of thing was happening, you might reach out anyway and say, well, have I got a grandfather that's doing this, or grandmother, or mother, or father, or brother, or best mate? So sometimes, 9 times out of 10, that'd be the answer. But sometimes you might come, look, this isn't the case. Have you got a blah, blah, blah? Yes, I've got that. Okay, because we've been given it. One of the loved ones will give us that information and can say, look, have you got this, that, or the other? Okay, well, that has got an energy in it.
That's
And
interesting.
come across it like that. The biggest problem, so I wouldn't worry if it was positive. There's not really a problem around it. You may not really get to know that there's an origin item. Typically, they'd be old. Typically, they'd be secondhand or have been passed down the family. The biggest thing where the problem would come is if something's been tricked into it, something negative's in an item, and perhaps you've been sent it. It doesn't happen too much with the West, but the East it definitely happens too. And then that's more likely a cursed or a summoned energy that they're using for bad purposes. So luck might have changed. So then you might reach out in order to, like, my luck's changed, I've been cursed, which again, the West is not common with, the East it is. Well, the first question is, have you received something recently? If there's been a gift, is there some jealousy? Where does this seem to stem from? I'm always walking by. So when I walk into the lounge, what's by the lounge? Is there anything new there? If it didn't used to happen 6 months ago, oh yeah, I got given an elephant. Okay, it's crystal. Before you know it, you can direct something back to pinpoint what it is.
So trust your intuition.
So it is with intuition. So really to know yourself without the intuition of what it is that's haunted, but you need certain things going on around you in order to raise the question in the first instance. And that's the point you can get some help.
That's interesting. There's a question here from one of the listeners. If spirits go into these items willingly, can they leave when they want?
It would be the need for some sort of permission again for them to leave, so they may need the help of someone, which would mean there would need to be some sort of communication between that spirit that's in an item and another.
So they've asked for permission in the first instance to come in, which has been accepted. They then have to ask to be released.
Yes, although I would have said, like everything, there's more than one way to deal with anything. They might choose to break an item themselves that they were attached to, which could release them.
Well, I hope that explains that question.
I know there's another question there. Dangerous. Yes, a negative could be dangerous, but not necessarily how you're thinking. In most cases, typically not. Or not that dangerous. They're not particularly going to do anything other than try and get into your mind.
Would you say that they're more interested in getting their story across?
I would.
They have a story to tell, which they want to share, which could, in actual fact, aid them to move forward.
Yes, I would. Really, it does depend on what the type of energy is that's in an item as well. So if it's been tricked, it might want the attention, it might want to be, it's not going to be happy. So that's going to need some sort of communication with it. If it's something that's chosen itself to be there, if it's positive, it's not going to be a problem. If it's something trying to hide and doesn't want to go to the light, perhaps they're not going to want to be noticed anyway. They're more likely if it's someone's taken that object and now they're not where they wanted to be, so that's more likely to cause a problem. Or if they've been conjured for a purpose, then that's where they're going to be following out. It's as if there's a master that's told them to do something, and they've got to fulfill the wishes of what's been instructed to them. So then you'd have to kind of take the control of being the master in order to cancel out that, or returning the energy and the control back to wherever it originated. So then we're getting more across then to like cursed energies.
Right. Just one question. Slightly out there. Can spirit attach themselves to a person?
Not without permission.
No.
Permission would be needed. Which is why one of the first things you'd say with anyone is make sure you know what you're communicating with.
Right.
To give a bit of an example, I would have said on a paranormal location, you might get a spirit that comes close, perhaps through a Ouija board, but it's saying their granddad. If it was a negative paranormal place, is the likelihood of granddad being in there and wanting to communicate with you, how likely is that to be?
I would
Spirit
say no.
can know everything. So I would have said be very careful then, because you're then inviting an energy that could be potentially pretending to be granddad close to you, and you're saying, come on then, come close. But if that isn't granddad, then you could be in for a problem.
Yeah, because it's telling lies, isn't it? Just to get close.
that's where you would want to, first of all, if you're going to try and communicate with a family member on an item like that one or any basis, make sure the energy around is positive. Make sure you put the intention out there, because intention's stronger than anything else, and then invite through. And you, as long as you've got someone that's experienced around that, they'd be able to tell if there's any trickery going on. But that is just an example of there maybe where permission could have been gained falsely, and you'd be led into that. But that's not that common either.
Have you any spirit items like this?
What, that pretended to be a grandfather?
No. Have you? Right, I'll rephrase. Have you any items which have attachments to spirit?
Yes. Most of which have found us. Probably around about 13. For different purposes. Near enough to come around us. Some for the form of protecting. What we do, especially with the clearances and things like that, some around to keep the home safe, some around to help with that, with that, some to help with healing, some to help with shamanic work, and some to raise energy, and some actually were physical mediumship is concerned. They wanted to prove the spirit world's out there, so their energy can be high and it can help with physical mediumship. And that's Capcom coming close to me now. That's more rare. So yes, but there's not any that are negative that are around us. There might be one that's in between, is neutral, and that's with regard to curse breaking. Sometimes there's energies that I wouldn't want to get involved with, so that spirit can deal with things that I might want to not put my name, might not want to put my name to, or be seen or noted as being behind a breaking of a curse. In which case, then that's useful when she's opted to work with us. So to me, it's very positive. I wouldn't want to be on the other side of that. That's the only one that's in between, like I said, around us, very, very positive.
Excellent.
And yourself, you've got a few.
Yes.
Vary from jewellery to dolls, from memory.
I've got 3 spirit dolls and a number of other items which have got spirit with them. Some which have come to yourself and we've had to release the energy. One in particular was a trapped energy. It was a positive energy, but had been used for a negative purpose.
I remember.
So with compassion, we spoke to the spirit and then released him to the light.
So yeah, that answers another question that we'd had in to us about can they be got rid of? Yes, but was understanding the reasoning of what they wanted and getting them back to where they wanted to be. And then there was no negativity from it, and very strong energy it was, and caused no problem. Whereas if it was just someone didn't know what they were doing and could have released that, then I didn't know what its intention was or what it wanted, could have technically had lingered strong energy around them. But yes, it was positive, but it was furious that it had been used for a purpose that it didn't want to be used for. But like all things, it's like us. We want to be understood.
Yes.
So if we're understood, then it'll be great good. It can be great good.
And what do all of us want to be treated like? We want to be treated with compassion. We want to be treated with empathy.
Yeah. So some that are deemed negative may not actually be negative. They just, even if something had got in with a positive energy and then was being used negatively or not that it wanted, could change its temperament.
Yes, because I should imagine that if they've been locked into an object and used for other things, they are very, very frustrated. They're annoyed that they're being manipulated in such a way. And they try to get the attention of the owner of the object to do something about it. Now, whether or not the owner recognises that object as having a spirit attachment to it, that's a different thing.
Yeah, it could well be a positive spirit. You're in a doll, you wanted to be around people, children. It's been noted that there's something funny about the doll. People go and put it in the attic. Well, now it's not like the life that it wanted. It's not around people. It's not around the energies. It's been shut away. Now, strange things must start happening in that property then. It might be that it's not negative, but it just wants to be, it doesn't want to be shut away.
Yeah.
So it's little bits like that where often it might be called to help people where something's going on, and then that's the explanation. And no problem once that's been realised. And Roger, another question that we received. If there was an item that something was attached to, and it wanted to be around that property, would it be upset or angry if that item was given away? So I wanted to cover that in a slightly different way for the person that's asked it. First of all, I don't think they're attached to an item within the property. I think they're then attached to the bricks mortar, which is still a physical item, so they're attached to the property itself. So therefore, it'd be very difficult to give that item away. So I don't think it'd encounter that problem. It may get used to an area or a place by being attached to an item, but then that's slightly different. So then as long as it was with respect and was going towards somewhere it could still achieve what it wanted, then there wouldn't be a problem. But if it was regard to it wanting to be around a particular area or something, I believe it would attach to the bricks and mortar.
Right. That leads me on to asking a different question.
Okay.
So if you've got a spirit which is attached to bricks and mortar, and you've got more than one object with spirit attachments, could they potentially clash?
They could clash. You could have more than one item attached to the bricks and mortar
and cause more ruction in or disturbance in the property because the spirits are aware of each other and they don't like each other.
Yes, that's actually quite common. So say there was a property where in the past, let's go back 100 years, and someone had killed someone else. You could have both those spirits there. One doesn't want to go to the light because they don't want to be judged because of what they did, and the other wants revenge for what happened. So both of those could be attached then to that property, where you might have a haunted property.
Yes, yeah.
So yes, and then the activity could be felt, could be seen, could be experienced because they're wanting to tell their story, or one's wanting to tell the story. But that property may not have had any problems at all for 100 years. And this lady was killed because, say it was a lady, was killed because she was pregnant. Well, if then the lady living in that property, there's a pregnant lady, all of a sudden that can re-establish what had happened in the past, because there's a link, then the activity could start. So just because activity, you might have lived in a property 15 years, no activity, and it just starts, doesn't mean it's not from something old.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
So it doesn't mean that there's always something current, which is why a problem stems. When it started, it could be something from the past, but there's something that's going on in that person's life that has just made the spirit awaken, so to speak.
So like in that instance, it could be somebody in the house is expecting a child. I suppose another one is physical alteration to the property.
Yes, if that was their pride and joy, they were the builder of that house, they've decided to stay there because that was their pride and joy. You start altering it, that could cause a bit of disrupt. And it might be that you could just be a spirit for any reason that's attached there, and they're like, why are you changing the property? We've been used to this now for 500-600 years. Something that might cause an issue as well, which is often when hauntings can start when there's alterations. But if you're aware of the spirits there to start with, as long as you put your intentions, look, we're not trying to change things for the best, typically spirits would keep calm. So that would give rise to another question that I've just thought of. Then people would say, well, can you just get rid of those spirits? If the spirit wasn't causing any harm, is it our place to get rid of them that are attached to bricks and mortar? If they're not causing any harm and they still don't want to go to the light for whatever reason, can we force them? Well, I would have said, no, I don't want to force them. If they were causing an issue, then yes, they might not want to go, but for highest good, they might need to go. But if there's no issue there, then they can live in harmony. I would have said that's not our choice to make, that's the spirit's choice to make.
Yeah. It might be that the spirits coming back and visiting the property or residing in the property love that property so much it doesn't cause a
That's slightly
problem for
different than when there's no
anybody.
attachment there, but that could still give some activity, yes.
Yes, it just wants to reside there because that is the place it loved during that
Yep.
person's lifetime.
Yep. I'd agree there.
Yeah, so I suppose if they're happy, we're not duty bound, or a person who can clear spirits isn't duty bound to remove that spirit because they're doing no physical harm, causing no ill effect in that particular property.
Yep. Yep. So if it was only that someone felt they were being watched and there was not actually anything going on, once they've understood that and they've not got a problem, then everything can be at peace anyway. I just don't think then that's in our place without something negative happening or a problem being around that we should force them to somewhere that they might not want to be for whatever reason. It's not our choice to decide. It's their choice. We can offer them the light and say, well, look, in the future, if you change your mind, you know where I am. Follow this light and you can come to me and I'll help. Unless they decide they want to go, I don't think it should be forced.
Comes down to free will, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a few people have been asking about second-hand items.
What's your thoughts on going into charity shops and buying objects, clothes, books, or what's Spirit's perspective?
I find it quite interesting. If it's a sensitive person, they may well come back with something that has got a positive attachment to it. Someone that wants it to get into good hands, if they're attached to a piece of jewellery, for instance, it doesn't mean it's going to be negative. But what you've also got to remember with second-hand items, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a spirit attached to the item, but it will have energies attached, residual energies, which can bring a different vibration into a home.
Yeah.
So often there might not be an attachment of an actual spirit, but it doesn't mean it's not going to change the balance of the energies in the home.
Yes.
Now, we could talk about mirrors here that might not be a portal, but mirrors, they absorb. So, say there was a mirror and it'd been around an awful lot of negativity, you get that mirror and bring it to the home. It doesn't mean there's a portal necessarily with that mirror, but it could have absorbed an awful lot of negative energy, which then you're reflecting that negative energy into the home. It doesn't necessarily need to be an old, it could be a brand new mirror. It was on the top of the pile, it was looking out when there was a forklift accident. So for anyone buying a mirror, I would say, always take one that's seen darkness. Don't take the top mirror, because you don't know what's been absorbed into it on its travels to get to where it was in the store.
So for people who are sensitive and open to spirituality in any form, should be cautious about these objects and just think about cleansing it before it's used, because you don't know who's handled it before.
Yeah.
Residual energies.
Yeah.
As you've said.
You don't know the history behind the items in the second hand. I wouldn't have said there's any problem with buying the second hand items, but just be aware of what it may have been around. So then, yes, cleansing those items. And if you do notice a difference in imbalance in the home afterwards, then it could well be down to that item.
See, on a lesser degree, I would say when we buy crystals.
I was just about to cover that, Roger. With crystals.
For people who work with crystals and they buy crystals, the crystals are forever picking up energies from around them. So,
have they been mined ethically?
Yes. Have they been mined ethically? Has the person packaging it up or cutting the piece or whatever been in a good mode or a bad mode? Same again for the person who's transporting it and then putting it through your letterbox. It could have those multiple energies or residual energies on that object. So
has it been pre-owned?
I would recommend cleansing, either putting in salt, running water if it's not water soluble, and then leaving it in exposed to sunlight and moonlight.
Yeah. So if we're careful with the crystals and items that are coming into the home, you want to be careful with as well. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I know it's worthwhile. Some of you might be thinking, well, what if we've got a haunted item and whatever? How do we communicate with it? So I will do a separate Thunder and Lightning with Roger on that one in the future. Perhaps on the next one, we will talk about how you can communicate with these items in various different ways.
It might be interesting as well to discuss some of the paranormal events where you've gone to properties where they have these haunted objects, like the museum.
Yep.
Where they've been sent from everywhere, and then they've just got a massive collection of these objects, which all have attachments.
Yep. Then some of that can cause major imbalances in the building, as well as just being the items that have got attachments on them. But yeah, no, that's definitely worth talking about. And that could probably be incorporated in the two of them, the communication and that, rather than just a separate one. We'll see how that goes.
Fascinating subject, and there's
It
so
is
much to
definitely.
it.
So, Roger, on a spirit's perspective of haunted items, what is it you'd like to know? What do you think it'd be good for the listeners to know? Let's put him on the spot.
I am thinking about it, yes. If someone realizes that they have a haunted object in their property, what would you advise them not to do?
Trying to free it without realizing or getting an understanding of why they wanted to be there in the first instance. Dumping it where it might break. Seeking someone else out, or a museum or something like that that may want the item, would be your best protocol. So relocation rather than trying to get rid of would be my recommendation. There's plenty of places that would take on the items. So if anyone has got that concern, then you can contact.
And if anybody does have any concerns, they can always contact yourself just to talk.
Yep. Yeah, that's no problem at all. That's no problem at all. I've got John now right by my side.
So basically we're saying that they're not to be feared.
Good evening, everyone. It is John. Hello, Roger.
Hello, John.
How are you, my friend?
Tip-top and tickety-boo.
Boo, tickety, tick-tock, boo.
Yes. And how about yourself?
I'm very good, thank you. So you are talking about haunted items. I have a perspective to give, as I have a lady by the side of me at the minute that is attached to an item. Her name is Anna. Now, she falls into the category that you spoke of earlier, lifetime of research, wanting to pass it on to another, but from a similar soul group, fully aware of others coming to Earth of starseed nature. So then it is fast-track wisdom being supplied and aid. So it is a good spirit volunteer to stay here longer than taking information back that had been learned. Passing it on for the good of all, yes?
Yes, that's fantastic.
So do we as spirit deem that as a problem? We would say no. It is then doing and facilitating something that spirit cannot. Some may call that bending the rules. We would call it extending a life path. It is a gray area. Some spirits that pass on may have good to do in the afterlife. So if their life path involves helping from a spirit nature for strength or protection, then they may choose not to go into the light. It does not mean they do not have a way out. Maybe after they facilitated helping another, when that person passes, they will choose to leave at the same time. It has been thought about, it has been calculated, and they are following their heart. The heart does not die if you're talking the spirit heart. So they are doing what they think is right. The other side, from the way spirits see it, yes, there may be a negative spirit that does not want to be judged. But again, if they're not doing any harm in the physical world, they just don't want to be judged. It needs them to understand they won't be, not for them to be forced on. For highest good, if they're causing problems, then yes, we move them back to their origin, their source. That is needed. The old way, when not understanding spirit that are causing trouble, others would lock them into a product or an item in order to shift them somewhere where they cannot cause harm. That is not needed when there is an understanding on how to take them back to source. Then, the real other option that you have already covered is when someone calling something in to do something bad on a curse basis. They're normally tricked. Yes, you can get some that are negative and want to do what is being called in to do, but less common, more rare. But I will say one thing that is very important that you both have missed. Whatever with spirit attached to an item, if there is any concern, find out about it. If it is something that needs to be dealt with, my medium can deal with it. Other mediums can too. Don't leave yourself with a problem. Understand it. If you're not comfortable with a positive spirit around you attached to something, then there is another chance for you to move it on to somewhere where it can be happy and be used. So really, I come through to confirm what you have already said, Roger.
Thank you, John.
But yet it can be quite hard to comprehend all of spirituality in people's minds. There's always different elements to things. And it is a good subject for others to understand a little better. So I cannot wait for you to discuss more how they can be communicated with. So I will say good night to you all. I will send love to all of you listeners and your families, and to you, Roger, and your lovely Suzanne.
Thank you, John. Excellent input there.
Let the love be with you all.
Thank you.
Good night, all of you.
So then, Roger, I'm not sure quite what he said there, but hopefully that was helpful. So, the last question that I've got then towards you before we finish off. The items that you've got, you've not gone and sought any of the items. You've kind of received them, is that correct?
Yes.
So, now on your spiritual path, would you have said they may have been collected by another for your purpose and greater benefit?
Now that is an interesting concept. I think ultimately the answer is yes. But in the first instance, they may have been given to cause disruption.
What do you mean given to cause disruption? Could that disruption that you're thinking, could that not have been them trying to be noted and noticed?
Yes, and it might have been me in the first instance not being aware as to what they were, a lack of understanding on my behalf, perceiving them in a different way.
Having an element of fear.
Correct.
Okay. See, because the more I've learned with them, I would have said definitely with a large proportion, especially as I'm aware that a lot of what you've got probably came from one, maybe two places. So they may have deliberately been collected on your behalf. They were only the keeper of them. You always used to say you were the keeper to pass them on. Perhaps they were for the greater good. You are the receiver of them, as they're meant to be energies that are around you to benefit others with. Strength and knowledge that comes from an additional guide, because they can act. A lot of items, especially when they're positive, can be like additional guides for you.
Yes, they can.
But then if you're getting to the point where you could use them, they're going to have to do something in order to be noticed that they have got energies within them so they can be used.
Yes.
The reason I ask that is obviously, being a medium, I have got one of your items, I've got an energy that's just come close to me, which is a shamanic energy. And you're studying the shamanic at the moment, so he's got a lot of wisdom that he can pass to you.
I know what you're talking about. I can see him now. Not in this room, but I can see him in my mind's eye as to where he is. Yes.
He's not by me now, so he's come back towards you. You might get a coolness that comes over you. So it's perfect time now for him to be able to do that and you to be safe.
I think he's been waiting quite a long time.
That may be the case, but it's you that he's wanted to work with.
Yes. I've always felt drawn to that particular object, whereas my good lady, it gives her the heebie-jeebies.
But that just shows certain times things can come into our lives. So that whoever gave you the item, say there was one person that gave you a multitude of items, he could have broken all those items up and given them one to here, one to there, one to here, one to there, and they're scattered all over the place. But handed to one person, it could have been his sole path to gather those, and for them to go in a certain direction on passing.
I'm going to contradict myself now. I know I am. Yes, I suspect, looking at it, looking back now, the objects were probably given at that time to help benefit my growth in certain areas. Again, with having a multitude of different energies, yeah, there's been a bit of disruption here and there.
So is that the person that passed the objects across, or is that spirit's intention for them to come in the direction they've come in? So that answers another question. Can spirit influence things when they're in an item? Yes, they truly can. And if they're positive, it will be in a positive way. That's what I wanted to leave our Thunder and Lightning on.
That's that's an interesting question to ponder.
So I would say it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from him.
Lots of love, all of you. Hope you've enjoyed. And the next one will be how to communicate with items like this.
Ta-ra. Ta-ra.
Good night, Rog. Thank you for a fascinating Thunder and Lightning.